Hi there, caregivers. Let's talk about why it's important for you to avoid hospitalizations and emergency rooms if you possibly can on the dementia journey. First of all, the stress on you both. I mean, there's naturally going to be more stress if you're in an environment like an emergency room or in a hospital. So that's kind of a given. But this actually, the research points out that 25% of the time, when you take your loved one to a hospital or an emergency room, 25% of the time, you're going to walk out with that person at the same baseline. 75% of the time, they won't be. So, statistically, it is not a good outcome for many dementia patients to be hospitalized or to be in an emergency room. And there are multiple reasons for that. One of them, if you're talking about an emergency room, one of them that's just important for you to know as a dementia caregiver. I took my husband John to the emergency room at one point, and he had had a fainting incident. And I was told by the nurse there when I explained that he had Lewy body dementia and that we really needed to be very careful about anything we did to him in terms of medicine. And she said, "Oh, our mandate, our job is to deal with the presenting issue, not the whole." And she didn't say not the whole person, but that's really what she meant. They were going to deal with the fact that he had fainted. And it really didn't matter at that point that he had Lewy body dementia. Now, I'd done enough homework by that time that I knew she didn't understand Lewy body dementia, and I had a better understanding of it than she did, which is typical for those of us who are taking care of Lewy body dementia patients. And also, a lot of you who are dealing with other kinds of dementia, you've probably done a lot of homework, and you may have a lot more awareness about certainly your loved ones' responses to certain kinds of medications, to certain situations. And so the fact that their focus is a presenting issue versus taking into a more full account, a fuller account, that wait, we got to be really careful how we deal with this patient because dementia is in the story. And particularly if it's Lewy body dementia, that simply cannot be ignored. So that's one of the reasons why you want to stay away from the emergency room if you can. Now, there are going to be situations where you cannot avoid that, and that's not what I'm talking about. There are a number of them that you can, and I'm going to talk about that. So hang with me until the end of the video, because I'm going to give you a couple of examples of what I mean, where you think you might normally go to the emergency room, but then you really decide not to, and why, and how that can work out. Okay, for going into the hospital, one of the reasons you don't want them to go into the hospital is you're dealing with a different type of doctor there. You're not dealing with a neurologist. You're not dealing with a memory disorder specialist. You're dealing with a hospitalist who's calling the shots for what's going to be happening while your loved one is in the hospital. So they're not aware of a full history uh, like your primary care doctor is, like your specialist that you're working with is. There's a void of information that you can't possibly fill in this situation with that particular doctor. And as a result, that hospitalist may want to change up their meds, may want to just take away everything and start all over again. I know many stories in talking with caregivers where this kind of thing has happened when someone's at the hospital. And as you well know, if you're in this journey for any period of time, that can create an absolutely chaotic situation, and is likely one of the reasons why only 25% of the people walk out of there being better off than they were before they came in. And so being aware that you're dealing with a different kind of medical professional when you're in a hospital setting is something to bear in mind. That specialist likely does not understand clearly Lewy body dementia because it is not as well known as many of the others, and just dementia in general. They may just not be well versed in dealing with a dementia patient because that patient is in there for something else that happened, and that's where their focus is going to be. Mistakes can easily be made in a hospital setting. Anyone who's ever worked in one or spent much time around one knows that that is definitely the truth. Of course, there's more exposure to germs and that sort of thing. The COVID restrictions that may not allow you to be as present is certainly going to interfere with communication. And you know that a person with dementia is not going to be able to accurately and reliably communicate with medical people about what their real needs might be. It can be harder to actually, this is ironic, but when you're in the hospital and you have an immediate need, if there's something you know that's about to happen, and you know that this is not a good thing, reaching a doctor quickly is not always easy in a hospital. It can be easier when you're at home to be able to get through to the specialist or your primary care doctor much more readily than you can a doctor in a hospital. I know that's ironic, but it does happen. So in addition to that, many of the LBD unfriendly drugs are more likely given in a hospital setting, much more likely. And here again, this is a lack of education awareness on the part of the medical people who are deciding what to do. They're not schooled in how careful you must be with a dementia patient, and especially a Lewy body dementia patient. So let me share a couple of stories with you where I had to make a decision very quickly about whether John was going to be going to the emergency room. Excuse me. The first one was when he had a fall. He didn't hit his head, but he fell along the side of the buffet in our dining room and ripped his ear. His ear actually had about a half an inch tear in it, was completely torn in the cartilage. And there was a little bit of blood. It was a jarring experience. There were a couple of caregivers who were visiting us, paid caregivers, but they were just having a social visit in our home. And when this happened, they immediately were like, oh, we need to take him to the ER. And I thought, wait a minute, I'm not sure that's a good way to go. I know he didn't, I watched the fall. I know he didn't have a hard impact on his head. He did tear his ear. Ears are made of cartilage. I think I can fix this because, of course, it was I believe, a Saturday. And Saturday or a Sunday. It was on a weekend when the doctor's office isn't open. Of course, these things happen when they're inconvenient. And so I decided that I think we're not going to do that. I'm going to call the pharmacy and talk to the pharmacist and find out what I can do to patch this up myself. And the pharmacist very graciously told me what I could do, prepared those things for me. And I ran to the pharmacy, picked up those things, came home and cleaned up John's ear and patched it up. We went to the doctor's office early that next Monday morning, as soon as we could get in there. And the doctor, the primary care doctor, told me I had done exactly the right thing. Avoiding the ER in that situation was a smart thing to do. I was able to fix that myself. Another thing that John had was chronic constipation. I did take him to the ER on a couple of occasions for that. I watched what they did very carefully and then simply talked with my pharmacist. And when it happened again, found I already had purchased something and had it at home. I had a bottle of, I believe it's magnesium citrate. I hope I'm not telling you the wrong thing, but talk to your pharmacist, find out what is it that they use in the emergency room to make the person go to the bathroom. And I simply shielded John's bed from any kind of permanent damage to it by using some plastic covers and things like that. Got him in his bed, tried to crank him up, sit him up as much as possible, and just worked through it with him there at home. And I basically became his nurse. So I avoided the ER in that scenario, which was a lower stress situation for John and for me, actually, at that time in our journey. The other time that I want to share with you was when John had, this was late in his disease, and he had already had a history of having focal seizures. And focal seizures are not the grand mal where the body is moving and thrashing about. It's where the person simply, all of a sudden, they are not with you and their eyes are blank, their face is blank. And sometimes they lose consciousness, and they're just simply not there. And they don't have any memory of it when it happens. So John had one of those when he was at his daycare facility. He was already on some medication that his neurologist had given to him for seizures. And when I was given a call saying there's been a terrible event, can you come quickly? I immediately drove over, got there as fast as I could. The paramedics were already there. The paramedics and the people at the adult daycare center were putting a lot of pressure on me to take John to the ER. He had sort of rallied a little bit by that time. By the time I got there, he was still unconscious, and then he quickly kind of woke up and sort of got it. He was very, very tired, but he was awake. Um, I was able to contact the neurologist office very quickly and say to the doctor in a text, I do not think he needs to go to the ER. This looks to me like it was a focal seizure, and I don't think they're going to be able to give us any benefit. What do you think? Within minutes, the doctor got back to me and said, "You're absolutely right. Take him home." And I took him home. And so we avoided that very stressful situation for both of us. And John simply went home, went to bed, rested, and his neurologist gave him a little bit more of the seizure medication going forward, because that was a pretty definite uptick in events. But we handled it without having to bring a hospitalist, bring an emergency room doctor or nurse into our story. If you can do this, these are examples of things. If you can possibly figure out how to manage it yourself, you can avoid a lot of trouble, a lot of trauma, a lot of stress, and possibly even have a more positive impact on your loved one's medical situation by not going to the hospital or the ER unless it really, really is called for. Things are different now. The rules of the road are different. You don't do what you would normally do when you're on the dementia journey every time. You have to adjust, you have to be flexible, you have to be proactive and think about what is the best choice for this situation. And then rest in it, because you're doing the best that you can possibly do. I appreciate what you do. Thank you so much for your gift to your family, your loved one, and your community. May God bless you. Thanks.